geldiniz. Şimdi açık veri hakkı üzerine konuşacağız. Benim adım Itır Akdoğan, TESEV'in, Türkiye Ekonomik ve Sosyal Etütler Vakfı, TESEV'in araştırma direktörüyüm. Bu oturumun moderatörüyüm. Konuşmacımız Teemu Ropponen. My Data Global ve Open Knowledge Finlandiya'nın direktörlerinden. Sohbetimizin daha akışkan olması için ben izninizle bundan sonra İngilizceye döneceğim. Zaten de bu oturumlar, bu salonun planlaması İngilizce yapılmış anladığım kadarıyla. Diğerkinden farklı olarak da soru cevap sohbet şeklinde yapacağız biz. Büyük bir sunum olmayacak. Now I switch to English. Teemu, tervetuloa.
Kiitos, kiitos.
Kiitos. I'm very pleased to have you here. So we will have this chat. I will have my questions, and at the end of my questions, I will receive questions from the audience for you.
And hopefully many questions.
Many, I so hope to. Can you please start by telling a little bit about yourself? And then I will start with my questions.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Teemu. I come from Finland. As Itır introduced, I work with data. And for the last 10, 12 years, I have worked after a career in the private sector in digitalization, have worked in academia, in government and non-profits around how we can make more fair, more equitable, more human-centric society. Working with e-participation, firstly in the Finnish government, and then after that with open data and personal data. So how can we use data to build better services that benefit all of us as citizens, as individuals? How can we solve those very, very difficult problems of our time, like the climate crisis, like the health issues we've had, like crises within things like war, for example, congestion in the cities, improve quality of life with data. That has been the key thing. And gladly, I have had a chance to work both, looking at it from very many perspectives, from academia, from non-profits, from businesses, and I think that all of those aspects are needed for this fair, sustainable, and prosperous digital society.
And actually, this is how we met. You were working at the Ministry of Justice.
That's true.
And I was working at the University of Helsinki, and we used to have a project on e-participation ages ago. Well, when we talk about rights, I think it's very important to define what kind of concept we are talking about. So my warm-up question is how you define open data.
At its simplest, open data can be defined as data that's accessible. You can access data. It needs to be able to be combined, repurposed. So you need to be able to combine multiple types of data, mix and match, and then share with whatever you have made out of that. Basically, what I mean is that, for example, PDF files or things that you openly put on the internet, that is not open data, but rather data in structured formats that developers can use to build visualizations or new types of applications or things like that.
Do you think it's a right?
Do I think it is a right? Open data definitely relates to many fundamental rights. It relates directly to the right of information, but also then indirectly, I think, to a lot of other rights we have, as data is very much a component in related to many other rights. As a right alone, perhaps not.
Perhaps not. And how do you think it relates to the right to the city?
To the city? Well, I think the city as a whole holds huge amounts of data, both related to how the city functions, the roads, the buildings, budgets, the population, statistical information. And it also holds often information on a very granular level about you. It holds information about people coming in and out of the city. So that is massively important material, if you will, for developing all kinds of services, and not only services, of course, also for planning and policy and kind of non-tangible tangible things. So the city is enormously important for data. It's also important in a very different way because cities are often kind of platforms for economic growth. They are platforms for innovation and such, so they should in that sense also foster the reuse of that data, not only for the purpose of better cities, but also for their businesses.
The previous speaker, in her last answer, she was insisting on data as well. So data really helps in our right to the city in many ways. Every time we talk about data, and open data especially, there are many people who are reluctant to share their personal data about privacy and all this, what their personal data will end up, where they will end up, and who will benefit from the data. So these are always the concerns of people and also institutions. And at My Data Global, you actually use personal data. My Data Global aims at collaborating for using human-centric data for better societies, for more prosperous cities. So now I'd like to, I think it is very, very interesting in this era of open data, opening all the data and all this reluctance with the personal data. You do actually what seems to be quite difficult. Can you please define what you mean by human-centric data and what kind of personal data you use in your work?
Sure, thank you. So again, if I talk about open data, and by definition, open data is not personal data. Open data is budgets, roads, traffic, maps, statistics, things like that, as an example. That again, you have a right to access, you have a right to remix or combine together, you have a right to share those products further. With My Data, we are talking about a similar thing, but the right of us as individuals to the personal data. So it's my right to get information about me from airline, from the taxi company, from the hotel, from MARUF here. It's about right to mix my data from my smart ring with some other information to understand my life better. And it's a right, if I want to share that information to my family perhaps, keep it to myself, or if I want to, I can donate some of that data to scientific research. I can donate that data perhaps to get discounts or better services from somewhere. But the idea of human centricity is that we are active agents. We are not just the subjects of data collection, but rather we ourselves have more control about the data trails we leave behind. Yes, I want to give information about my diet so that somebody can provide me better suggestions for lunch. Yes, I want to give my library what I have read in the library. Maybe I want to give that to a tourism application, so when I come to Istanbul, I will be recommended based on that information some things that I will likely want to do. But I don't have to do it, and that's all about having the individual in control as the empowered, active person.
Well, you as someone who values, who benefit from data, can have that kind of framework and that kind of understanding. But how do you convince ordinary people who don't know much about data, but who still hear from somewhere that they have to be concerned about this privacy and personal data? How do you convince those people?
Great question, and a difficult one, right? Because we know by any survey done to the public, we know that people are concerned about personal data leaking, and we have massive misuses of data in the past, in elections or for digital identity theft and so on. At the same time, we very willingly ironically give our data to all kinds of companies. Everybody gets asked the question, do you agree with terms of service? And everybody clicks yes, yes, yes, I have read the terms of service. No, you haven't. Most people have not read the terms of service. One key thing there, not the only one, but one key thing is the kind of transparency. You are likely to donate your data to research, or you are likely to give information about you to a service if you know how that is used. You need to get some value from it, but even if you don't get the value, there is some transparency. Like if I give my information about my health habits to research, I might get a cure for a disease in 30 years. It might never help me, but if I know that it's going for good, and if I know transparently how that data is being collected about me, then maybe I can trust that it can be shared. And I'm using this health as an example. I'm coming from Finland, as you know by now. One of our member organizations is just starting a 25-year project in the topic of healthcare. So in over 25 years, they are studying a certain population. Of course, in 5 or 6 years, you will not even remember what you have originally given permission to, except now they are giving digitally, being more transparent, how that data is being used over the course of 25 years. So transparency is one key thing there.
Can you tell a bit more about this transparency? Because I think in Finland, in Helsinki, they define transparency very, very specifically, like what data you can access.
Sure. So I mean, first of all, there is the Freedom of Information Act in Finland, which basically is saying that you have a right to ask government entities basically about anything, and unless it is a security or privacy issue, you will get answered. You will get some kind of a response. If I ask for a list of events that the mayor has hosted and who have been the guests, I have a right to get that. But I also have a right to ask any particular agency, what information do you have about me? And I have a right to get now a digital copy of that if it is something that I have myself given, things like right to correct it. Of course, there is often information that might be wrong, it might be outdated. And this has now become, as many probably know, also not only a national thing, but in the EU, GDPR kind of harmonizes this type of rights, and is actually a fundamental right in the scope of the EU law.
It's actually quite interesting to ask institutions what kind of data you have of me, so that you can actually have a compilation of your data that the public institutions or maybe even companies have of you, so that you can have your own track, your own data archive.
You can have your own data archive, and that's exactly what we want to do, except right now, if you ask for it, you will, from many places, get papers, PDFs, or whatever. But how we see the My Data thinking develop in practice also is that more and more of this type of data is digitized. So all of a sudden, instead of my wallet with my cards there and my receipts there, I have that digitized. And a great example, an area where we work a lot is around work and employment. For example, the information about studies, work history, driver's license, military service, first aid skills, all kinds of things that might be useful. I should be able to combine that data and give that, for example, to an agency that, hey, I want a job, this is my profile, can you recommend me jobs? It is much faster than writing CVs and doing that. or maybe for career coaching. Please, Teemu, you are done your software development 20 years ago. You are a little bit out of date. Do these 3 courses on AI and these courses on modern web development, and you will be a highly valued AI consultant, for example. So using that type of personal information at my control for the benefit of me, and in this case, perhaps an employer, and of course the society benefits when people find jobs or studies faster.
And how do you use personal data for the city?
For the city. Well, so cities is actually a very, very important use case of personal data and use case of my data. One of my favorites, and you know, there's a lot of discussion at this event about the climate crisis, the carbon footprint, mobility, things like this on sustainability very broadly. For example, the city of Lyon in France has experimented with an app, a digital solution that basically combines gas, electricity, and water consumption. It's coming from 3 different utility companies. You are combining them into one. And at simplest, it's about seeing how much water, gas, and electricity you are spending every month, and in terms of money and consumption. So immediately you are seeing what your utilities cost. But now the interesting thing that they are experimenting with is making this into a kind of a game for citizens. So if you save on your electricity, if you save on your gas or water consumption, you get some monetary rewards, but you also get special badges, special credits, an avatar. You are a climate superhero, or things like this on different levels. And the experience that they have is then families with their children are wanting to turn off the lights and use as little water as possible because they want to get to the next stage. And this is like, again, there was a discussion in the other room about top-down, and that's often what policies and regulations, of course, are. But this is a very contrary to that, a bottom-up way to understand this on a very human and very individual level, that, hey, I need to improve by 10% or whatever the case might be. So I find that fascinating, that personal data, sometimes we think very small, that, oh, it's about you and me. It's not only small thing, it's combined. All of our data is massively huge. And that's actually why, for example, some people in the United Nations have been thinking that, okay, for the next iteration of the Sustainable Development Goals, could there actually be a kind of a bottom-up reporting as well? I think that is a difficult idea, but anyway, a right kind of idea to also understand not only how things are looking from the helicopter view, but also how things are looking from bottom up.
Do you publish personal data that you collect for your projects as open data?
Do I publish it? I don't. I donate my data to various services, but there it usually gets anonymized. And I publish it only for myself or in small circles. I know that people publish their own data. For example, people who are suffering from rare diseases or even less rare, like diabetes. We have some people who are very keen to be very open that, hey, this is my data, not that this is like some individual's data, but this is Michael's data, or this is John's data. What do you make out of it? Can you help me? And I find that interesting, but I would then note that, again, it's a right. We have a right to privacy as well, and we have a right to not. We should have a right to personalized services. We should be able to reveal information about us and get better services, but not all information. And again, we come to an interesting point that sometimes we could collect a lot less data. What I mean by that is that if I am buying cigarettes at a cigarette dispenser automat, it doesn't need to know my identity. It needs to know that I'm over 18 or 21 or whatever is the legal limit at that place, but it doesn't know that it's Teemu who is buying those cigarettes. And I don't smoke, by the way, I just made that up. So often the service is actually, and sorry to go on a bit of a detour, actually ask much more information than what is really needed. And that too affects the trust of people that, you are asking so many questions, how does this even relate to the task at hand in this service?
At My Global Data, you collaborate with many city stakeholders. You don't only work with the cities, with the municipalities, but you also work with other institutions, private sector as well, right? Civil society as well. And you have many ideas, many projects. I was wondering if, with the use of personal data, you ever had a project that increased resilience of cities anywhere in the world? If you have any example.
Well, I think the climate resilience and understanding the carbon footprints and such, I think that's the one that comes most closely. I think the resilience, of course, will be tested over time as we get into this crisis. Again, mention of the earthquakes, and there, of course, having both open data as well as personal data, incredibly important in solving next time things better. The same with COVID-19, which was a huge impulse for innovation in both good and bad. And I think in the end, many of those contact tracing softwares maybe didn't work as well as envisioned, but anyway, there was experimentation done with them. And there, for example, there was a lot of discussion and debate about privacy, and in the end, it was much of the kind of tracking software was kind of useful and had personal information, but anonymized in a way that was kind of good in the end. So these are a few of the kind of, let's say, resilience solutions. And of course, through again, building on the COVID-19, one thing that I think in a lot of places we saw improve is the use of the QR codes and such as kind of passes. And there again, not every piece of information about you needs to be proven, but rather you are showing QR code that yes, the holder of this has gotten within the last 48 hours a valid negative test, for example, to access places. I don't know if that was here in Turkey, but I assume that it was in most places.
Yeah. And when we were discussing about this data things, you were mentioning that only a small part of the overall data in the world is used, and that your kind of projects actually help using more data for more good. Can you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's remarkable. We are taught right now that data is the new oil, and I hate that analogy. I would much rather call data the new soil, because very much we want to build on the data, and just because you use it once, it doesn't make it go away. But the soil that we have, in some research, shows that as little as 20% of the data collected is actually used. And that's like, wow, 80% of the data collected actually never gets used. So that's not misuse of data, that's misuse of data. And using that data in better ways could unleash enormous opportunities for various types of things. Again, for the good, for the businesses, for the individual benefit, whatever. But that's also good to remember that it's huge amounts of data that we are not using.
Yeah. And also, of course, use for the right to the city, for better cities, for more resilient cities. Thank you very much. This was the end of my questions. Now we have about 5 minutes for questions from the floor, if you have any. Yes?
And others can meanwhile think of the next question.
I'm a little bit wondering about sharing my private data with the companies, especially after reading the book of Shoshana Zuboff. So what do you think about the behavioral surplus? Because Shoshana Zuboff in her book tells about the short data circuits that you tells us. We provide we share our private data with the companies, and then after companies improve their services, and then after we get this improved services. So this is the short circuit. But Shoshana Zuboff described very well that there is another big circuits in the behind of this data sharing environment. And here there is a lot of big profits made by companies, and he described like a behavioral surplus, because basically it starts with us, with our data, but we don't benefit from these circuits. So what do you think about this one? How can we fight against this one?
So unfortunately, the sound is a little bit weird. I think I understood. So Shoshana Zuboff is definitely among the same kind of thinkers as what we think, that the big tech giants, the monopolies, are misusing our data. It's good that our data is used to improve the services, sure, but when they are reaping profits and we are being surveyed and monitored like we are, that of course is not fair. And that's part of the kind of my data mission, is exactly that yes, I can donate or give my data. It's not always donating, I can just give it to Facebook or whatever, as long as I also benefit from it. Well, they will argue that, oh, you get the free service and so on, but that's like, that's a long argument, but anyway, they are locking you in, and that is definitely against many moral code, but also illegal. I mean, Facebook and Google are consistently being fined by various European governments, for example. Well, how do you solve it then? That's interesting, and it's very difficult for smaller players to kind of break the market, and that's exactly the oligopoly that we have at the moment. And one of the kind of three my data principles is to move from closed to open ecosystems. So indeed, I should be able to, first of all, if I want to move from Facebook to its competitor, I should be able to take my data from Facebook and then use it there. But that alone is not enough, because again, if you and Itır and me and some of our friends go to the other service, everybody else is still on Facebook or Google or Twitter or whatever. But the services should actually be interoperable, so that from your Facebook Messenger, you can communicate to another competitor's messenger, just like in email, right? I am using a different email provider than you are, probably, than he is, but they still work together. So interoperability would there be one key to kind of balance that out, and they will fight. The big tech will fight forever against that. Sorry for the long answer, but I hope it answers to you a little bit. I think we have 1 minute, so I will stop there and let's continue this.
We have time for one more question. Yeah.
Let me ask very shortly, what do you think about data of the companies, their open data of companies, how transparent are they, how can we reach their production processes. We can see them, how they produce an item, for example, a clothes in Bangladesh. We can't see them, we don't know who is working in what conditions. Can you, what do you think on those issues?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. The world of open data, roughly speaking, is coming originally very much from a sentiment of public sector. And very much coming that hey, this data about the roads and transportation, whatever, it can be used in multiple places, let's do that. And I think the companies publishing open data is a little bit more recent. It's become more popular, for example, for things like making sure that others are building on the company data. So for example, companies' products or locations of their stores and things like that, you want to publish that because you want your whatever other tourist apps or service finder apps to find those locations. So there's a benefit to the company in publishing that data. It gets reused in other services. But what you mentioned about the kind of transparency of, let's say, sustainability indicators, very broadly thought, I think that's an important one and definitely helps companies be more transparent. Whether it should be the companies publishing it themselves or should it be published through like various types of intermediaries that collect that from multiple companies, that can of course be debated. But I think my understanding is that the consumers are also demanding more openness from the companies, and actually not just openness in the form of reports, but openness in the form of the actual data. And I say this also from a perspective of one particular business, from the media industry. So more and more I see that media companies, when they are making some interesting analysis about quality of schools per district or something like that, in addition to publishing their articles and their nice visuals, occasionally publish it as open data so that their stories are better trusted, that it's not media just looking at it from one angle, but rather that if you are a skeptic, and there always is a skeptic, that skeptic can test it, or if you're an innovator, and there always is an innovator, they can do something interesting, twist it and compare it. So I think you're onto something. I think companies are still in the early phases, a long story short, but for example, the work conditions, the production processes, things like that, regardless of industry, can be quite useful. And one thing we emphasize is, both in terms of open data as well as personal data, is that it's very cross-sectoral. It's about public transport or energy or public services, apps we use, media, insurance, finance, whatever sector there is data to be used. And most interesting things happen when you combine data from multiple different domains.
Thank you very much. We exhausted our time. Thank you very much for the audience. So the idea of this session is that open data, even if it is not a fundamental right itself, using this data might bring up solutions that will ensure our right to the city. Right? That's the message.
It's a very fundamental building block for many of the other rights that we are enjoying.
Thank you so much, Teemu.
Thank you.